Good morning and welcome to the Pittsburgh Current. I almost did it again. The Pittsburgh Current podcast. I am editor and publisher Charlie Deitch, and the Pittsburgh Current is out for its sixth issue this week. We're almost to double digits, I guess. Although coming out every 2 weeks, I guess it'll be more like the end of the year when that happens. But issue 6 is on the streets. The cover story is the Carnegie International hits town, and we also have the official Art Noir guide to Pittsburgh for the Carnegie International. You can get tips on restaurants and bars, but more importantly, it has a lot of the art exhibits that are going on outside of the International, smaller independent exhibits as well. So you're definitely going to want to check that out. My guest today is someone I got to know after she was really a political candidate. It's Aryanna Berringer is a 2018 candidate for lieutenant governor. She dropped out of the race because she found that she couldn't raise enough money than her opponents with deep family pockets who were able to finance their campaigns. But she has written a new book, and it's called My Place in the World. It's to help parents talk to their children about politics in this crazy time we live in. And so welcome, Aryanna Berringer.
Thanks, Charlie. Good to be here.
Thanks for coming. So let's talk about the book first, because it's really something that intrigues me. Talk to me a little bit about what was the onus for the book and how you came about.
So just after the election, when I dropped out of the race for lieutenant governor, I'd been on the road a lot. I think I'd been by that time to over 35 of our counties.
Yeah.
And so sometimes my kids would come with me. Most of the time they were unable to. And so it was like my very first night home with the family. And my littlest one, Atlee, who's now 2.5, wanted me to be the one to do like the nighttime routine with her. And that always includes a story.
Sure.
So I lay down with her, read her story, go to shut off the light, and she says, like, one more. And I'm tired. It's been a long day.
Right.
I want to go relax too. So there's no way I'm turning that light back on.
Right.
And I just extemporaneously tell her this story. And I thought nothing of it. The next night, she asked for it again.
Wow.
And that was the moment where I was kind of like, okay, that's interesting for a 2-year-old to be like, I want my Atlee story again.
Right, yeah.
And I came downstairs and told my husband, Darren, I was like, Darren, you're never going to believe this. Atlee asked for her story again. He's like, what story? I told him. He goes, you need to write that down. I think there were a couple swear words in that. And then I did. So that's how it started, right? That's how this book was made.
Interestingly enough, when Arianna and I talked, you can actually find Pittsburgh Current story on Arianna's book in our paper this week. Arianna had actually given me the unedited version of that story, and as I was writing it, and granted, we always sort of, if we don't edit speech too much, and I thought, well, it is for a children's book, so we'll take the shits out of there for a second. So, but yeah, no, it's really a great book. What was when do you remember, or do you have a thought when you were sort of spilling the story out in the moment? Do you recall, like, what was the process? Was it just stuff that came to you? Were you thinking about something in particular? Was your campaign run sort of, did it influence what you were saying?
Oh, I think so.
Yeah.
When coming from a place in my world, right? Coming from where I grew up, I always try to let my children understand that they live a very privileged life.
Yeah.
And so we talk a lot in our home about exploring and going on adventures and learning about who you are, and that, it doesn't matter what other people think of you. It's what you think of yourself. And we kind of have these conversations anyway, just as a part of like motherhood. And when you talk about politics with kids as well, I always try to break it down for them in ways that they understand. And so this particular story, I just hope for my kids that they go on these adventures, right? Whether that is traveling, whether that's, going to some university or college or whatever it is, like all of those things I want for them. And so when I told Atlee this story, it was very much like, well, one day I want you to go climb a mountain.
Right.
One day I do want you to go swim in the ocean. She's done that. But like, you know what I mean? Like those are the things. And so I think that's really how it all kind of came to be as I was telling this to her. And in the end, like, I want my children to know that if politics is something that they want to go into one day or they're passionate about, that just because you're a little girl doesn't mean that you don't get to participate in that process.
Yeah. And what was your experience like as a child growing up? And you and I have talked a little bit about this in the past. What was your experiences growing up? First of all, how did they differ from what the life that your kids have? You said that, you know, they kind of have a life of privilege. What was your childhood like?
I mean, we grew up poor.
Yeah.
I mean, food stamps, free lunch.
Yeah.
And I talk about that a lot. I talk about being hungry. I talk about not knowing where our next meal was going to come from. I watched my mom work 3 waitressing jobs just to try to make ends meet, and that wasn't a reality for her. She still couldn't do it.
Wow.
And so, you know, I watched our water get shut off and go, well, I'm not going to be able to brush my teeth today. I got to throw my toothbrush in my backpack and brush them when I get to school.
Yeah.
Like, those were realities. And my kids have never had any of those, right? The water's never been shut off. They always have a meal. They've always had a roof over their heads. And so, yeah, they watch their mom work hard, but I think that that's still a really good thing for them to witness.
Sure.
But because of an education, I don't have to work 3 jobs. Right? Like, I can make a living wage, but just because my mom didn't have an education doesn't mean that she shouldn't also be able to make a living wage. How
did those experiences form you as just a person, but also how did it form you as someone who's civically minded and your politics? How did those experiences form that?
So, I mean, we didn't talk about politics growing up. That wasn't a part of the conversation. We were too busy just trying to make every day work.
Sure.
And so when I finally got to a place where I felt comfortable enough to begin to think about politics, I started to recognize that people like me, people that come from my background, are not represented.
Right.
And that pissed me off. That I can look at all of Washington, D.C. and go, well, none of you know what it's like to come from poverty. I think the statistic that I heard was that maybe 14 have come, people that are serving in Congress over a decade, only 14 of them ever came from a working class background.
Wow.
That's not okay. I mean, that's why we see the policies that we see right now.
Right.
So, all of those experiences have kind of shaped who I am. They shape how I raise my kids, and they shape why I get out here and talk about politics and why I've run for office.
Right. In the book, spoiler alert, and I think we already showed the picture, and it's one of the most sort of poignant images in the book is your daughter raising her hand to Donald Trump as he tries to tell her that she doesn't belong here. This is his house, so to speak. It's a really powerful image. What is it like? How do you talk to your kids about the state of politics now? I mean, it's one thing, like, I think when I grew up, political questions I had for my parents is when I would hear terms like electoral college. You know, I still wouldn't understand it. Even if they knew how to explain it, I don't think I'd understand it. But as a parent, you're facing a whole new line of questions. So how do you deal with that? And how do you, especially for your kids who, or maybe just in the last, say, 4 years or so, really kind of paying attention to the presidency and so forth, how do you explain to them that this is not the norm and we need to fight to make sure it doesn't stay the norm? So how do you explain it to them?
We always kind of start with the history of it. Like, you know, we talk about Barack Obama. My kids watched Barack Obama, accept his, presidency. Like, we participated. That was a part of their growing up. So because we've always been engaged in politics and always kept them in the loop, they recognized right away that this was not normal. They were like, that's not how presidents speak.
Right.
And so the topics, though, that's where the struggle starts to happen, right? When my 10-year-old daughter hears the term sexual assault during a presidential campaign.
Right.
And the news is saying, well, our president has been accused by 13 women of sexual assault. And then there's this video that's playing, and, you can get away with anything. I have to, in that moment, say, hold on, this is I wasn't prepared to have a conversation about sexual assault with my 10-year-old, but you have to do it. I would rather her hear it from me and start that conversation. But it's also when you have to be delicate with, right? Like, we've got to make sure that I'm not scaring her so much, but at the same time, educating her. And that's where it's a fine line, and it can be a little challenging.
Right. And that's also, we talked about, but also a conversation that you had with your son as well. I mean,
for sure.
And I think that I don't know. I don't think that, I mean, hopefully that there is some good that can come out of this, but hopefully one of those things is that parents are talking to their children, especially their male children, about sexual assault and you know, what the different levels are, how just, you know, something, you know, like back when I was a kid and earlier, you know, nobody said that cat calls and, you know, whistling at a woman was wrong and was a form of harassment. You know, those are things I think that some people learned on their own, or unfortunately didn't learn at all.
Right.
Which is part of the problem that we're in.
Right.
So I would hope that at least there are more parents talking to their sons about, you know, how to treat women.
Right. I mean, there's two things that I talked to him about, and my daughter, right? Both. No is a complete sentence. That means, Donovan, if someone tells you no, they don't have to give you an explanation why. Cameron, you can just say no, and you don't have to explain yourself, right? So those are definite. That's something that we talk about a lot. And then the other one is that I talk with him and both of them, but that a verbal, like a woman saying, yes, I am okay with that. Don't just assume. Never assume what she's thinking or feeling. You need a verbal confirmation before you do anything. And I think those are the two things that I try to like hit home and remind them about, because you have Donald Trump saying, you know, boys these days are under attack, or what did he?
Oh, what did he say?
It's a tough time in America.
Yes, to be
a young man.
Right, exactly.
No, it's not.
Yeah, it's really not.
It's really not.
Yeah, it's funny. These are things that, I mean, I don't know that I can tell you. I know for a fact I was never explicitly told not to do these things, but I didn't do them. It's just weird to me, and it's strange to me that people can accept what someone like Donald Trump tells us about what is now acceptable behavior, and how they're just willing to accept that, and they're willing to just accept any lies that come out without questioning. And, you know, that's like used to be the telltale sign of the right, was they questioned everything, you know, whether there were birth certificates or not. They insisted on questioning every single thing. So it's just kind of a strange time that we live in. It is,
and I think that's part of the reason, like, for this book. It doesn't go into all of these details, right? But it starts a conversation. Right. And I feel like that's what I'm hoping for. I'm hoping that parents get the opportunity to start a conversation. And it doesn't have to be with your 2-year-old, right? Like, I get that. But maybe with your 10-year-old. Yeah. Son or daughter, right? A lot of people look at the book and go, oh, I'll buy that for my granddaughter. Buy it for your grandson too, because they also need to see a young woman. And she's a little bit of color, right? Yes. Like her mama. Yep. And a young woman of color stand on the steps of the White House. Yeah. Because that's going to be their future, and they need to be all right with that too. Right. Exactly. So from the time that you first told the stories to Atlee, at what point did you decide to make this a paper, a paper project and do a book? Well, as soon as Darren said, you got to make that a book. Yeah. And I was like, okay, well, how do I do that? Yeah. And I knew that I needed to get an illustrator. And so I did some research online, and Liz Beatty is a young woman from here in the Pittsburgh region. And I saw her images and went, that's what I want. Yeah. I love it. It's, it's appealing for kids. She has a way. And so I reached out to her and I said, I'd love to hire you to draw some illustrations for these words. And I kind of gave her that creative control to do it, because she's the artist, not me. Here are my words. Right. Tell me what you think. What comes to mind when you see this? And I think she knocked it out of the park. One of the great things is
the yellow boots that Atlee's wearing in the whole thing, and I think that's a nice image to kind of carry throughout. Was that something? Does Atlee wear yellow boots?
Oh,
was that
yeah.
All the time?
All the time. So we live on 4 acres out in Murraysville.
Sure.
And so my kids are always tromping through the woods. And so when we first moved into that house, I bought her a little pink pair of boots.
Yeah.
But the next year I bought her yellow ones, and she loves these. She can put them on herself. And so I see her all the time walking around in her yellow boots. And so when I told her the story, I told her a story that she's in her yellow boots because she knows she's going on adventures. She's going on adventures in our backyard in those boots.
That's awesome.
And so as I told her the story, that's one of the details I kept in. And so when I sent the image to Liz, I sent her one of Atlee in her little yellow boots. And actually in this copy, the very back page, I added a picture of Atlee in her little yellow boots. I might be able to show you guys up here. Yeah. So yeah, that's absolutely something she wears.
That's awesome. And so, the art that Liz created it's really great, and it really is. It has that really childlike feel, and it gives you the sense of a kid's book. What did you think about her? And I will say this: I'm proud of you because when I saw the Donald Trump caricature at the end, I thought, that's very restrained, after especially knowing your opinions, my opinions. So was that a goal to keep that kid friendly as well?
Yes, without a doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah. Of course, adults are going to buy this book.
Yeah.
But I really want it to be for kids. I really kept it restrained. I really kept it in a way that was open to kids and own interpretation.
Yeah.
Right. So Atlee's place in the world may be the White House, but some other child's place in the world may be being a doctor or a lawyer or an activist or whatever. Right. Like, so I want to keep that open. And I think that in the future, if I'm so fortunate, we'll see, but to make this a series of books, I really want them to kind of go, this is your introduction to Atlee. Yeah. And then we're going to start tackling some other issues.
Right. I was going to ask, have you thought about what some of those other issues might be specifically, or general topics?
I mean, so the one that keeps coming to mind for me, because it's one that I've had a conversation I've already had to have with my kids, is around immigration.
Right.
And Donald Trump's highly restrictive and ridiculous immigration policy. And talking to them about how we are a nation of immigrants. Yeah. And it is what makes us better. The diversity that we get from different cultures make us better people, make us a better country. And so I think that's one that's been on the forefront of my mind. But there's so many, right? Yeah. Unfortunately, right now. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's even, I think that something that we're seeing in this election cycle coming up, we have more women who started runs for office and are also are in November. They're coming down to, we have women in the general election, and more women, I think, than at least in my recent memory that I can remember. And I know that you follow this as a board member of Women for the Future of Pittsburgh. Do you think that the time we live in is that why we saw so many women say, you know what, it's time for me to sort of take control and go out? What do you think we owe this?
I think it's been a slow build.
Yeah.
I don't think that, yes, I think there are some people that woke up the day after Donald Trump got elected and went, what happened to my country?
Right.
But I think that this has been a slow and steady build of women getting more engaged, becoming a part of the process. And when I ran for Congress in 2012, there were a lot of women running then. Yeah. And every year I've seen more women run for office. And I think, yes, Donald Trump did spur some newcomers to the table. But I think that women have recognized that if we are going to achieve the kind of policies and legislation that we want, we have to have a seat at that table.
And maybe just a thought just occurred to me. Is it maybe that we have more women, as you said, it's been a slow build, more women are making it to that next level? I mean, we're seeing more women in November actually getting a shot to go into office. And we saw that we have Summer Lee and Sarah Murato, and a lot of people talk about them. But what they did was they defeated two of the most entrenched politicians, Democrats. To beat Acosta in the city is a big deal, and to do that your first time out is an even bigger deal. And I think that sort of shows us that that voters are paying more, either voters with like minds are coming out more, or just more voters are finally saying, I have to get out and spread, but let my vote count.
Right. But let's be honest. Sarah and Summer were bold.
Absolutely.
They were bold in their campaigns. And that's what's missing oftentimes, especially as we get into general elections, is that candidates get scared. Mm-hmm. They get worried, and they stop being bold. And when they're not bold and out there talking about issues that are important to the lives of us every single day,
right,
people will not turn out.
Right.
And that's actually my worry and my concern, is that we are not having bold enough politicians going into November.
Right.
And I worry about the next, this is a big blue wave. This is, we're going to win this. But if we don't have bold ideas at the table, people are going to be like, well, okay, maybe not. And then they're going to go the day after Election Day, Democrats are going to be like, what just happened?
Right. And you are listening to the Pittsburgh Current podcast. Charlie Deitch, along with Aryanna Berringer, talking about politics and her new book, My Place in the World. You can follow us on the socials at PGH Current, and you can also follow Arianna at _Berringer on Twitter. Yep. Any other handles you want to throw out there? AriannaBerringer.com.
That and Aryanna Berringer on Instagram. That's my one of choice. I'm not on Twitter a whole lot.
No. And if you want to get a copy of the book, you can get a copy of the book at Amazon or at AriannaBerringer.com. And you are having a launch event for the book on Monday, October 15th, 5 p.m. at Defer Coffee and Tea in the Strip District.
Yeah.
So that should be a fun.
It's gonna be a fun little party.
Yeah.
And Atlee will be there in her yellow boots.
Wow, you could get mother and daughter to sign your book.
There you go. Maybe a little handprint.
That's great. That's a great idea. So going back to what you were just talking about, which is boldness. I like to think as a journalist that I try to stay, up on everything going on, and I have to tell you, it's almost been work to sort of keep up to date, because I remember 4 years ago during the gubernatorial election, both the primary and then when Tom Wolf was trying to unseat Tom Corbett, mm-hmm. you couldn't turn on the TV or you couldn't open a paper and not see something sort of charged about this race. And I honestly, I see some ads, of course we see some ads, but sure. I'm not, like, as you said, I'm not feeling the energy out of that race. So I'm not sure if that means that Wagner's not a strong opponent or that we're going to get surprised in November. And I hate for that to be the case, but it's just, there's something empowering about this election coming up, but there's also something that is a little bit of an eerie feeling.
Right. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. Mm-hmm. I think that the governor's race is boring.
Yeah.
It is a snooze fest.
Yeah.
They're not talking about those bold ideas.
Right.
They're not getting people excited to go vote for them.
Right.
And my bigger concern is that because they're not talking that way, those down ballot races, our state house,
yep.
our state senate, what's going to happen to those races? Are people going to turn out? They're not going to. And if they don't turn out, then, I don't think that Tom Wolf's going to lose. I think Governor Wolf will win, but he's going to be stuck with the same House and the same Senate, and what are we going to accomplish? Right.
And at the very least, although I don't know if it's been too much of an issue, but at the very least, I don't think the Pennsylvania State House and Senate are going to tilt blue this cycle. But you have to start somewhere. But it's very important to get rid of right now they have a veto override in the House, and so I think it's important that you kind of have to start somewhere. And you have folks going into the State House like Sarah and Summer, and they're going to be great voices. As you said, I think they're going to continue to make bold moves. But there are other state races out there that are just. There are two state House races that, right off the top of my head, that Mike Turzai and Emily Skopoff.
Yep.
And Daniel Smith and my buddy Daryl Metcalf. And these are two races that again, these are two races that I wish I was feeling more energy from. And we actually had Mitch Cates, who works on the Daniel Smith campaign, in here a few weeks ago, and we talked politics and we talked wrestling, as he's a former professional wrestler. Which was
wow, I didn't
know he is. I didn't know that either until we started chatting. But I feel like those are two really key spots, because you have Mike Turzai, who makes the appointments, committee appointments, and you have Daryl Metcalf on the government committee, who Turzai has shown he's not going to remove, and who is keeping any substantial legislation that comes from a Democratic legislator from ever hitting the floor. And so, are there races that you're watching that you think they should go one way, or we need them to go one way, but you're just not sure that?
I mean, I'm not the pontificator of knowing what the statistics and the
Sure, oh, me either.
But I do know people.
Yeah.
And I've had the opportunity to get to know a lot of these candidates. I've got to know Dan. I've got to know Emily, and I think they're phenomenal people.
Mm-hmm.
I think that they've got that when they win, because I do think that those are both very winnable races.
Absolutely.
And actually, I think Emily just came out with some really great poll numbers the other day, and both the Women for the Future of Pittsburgh has endorsed her candidacy. We got a shot. Lindsey Williams. She's got a shot.
Yeah, she does.
We've got out here in Pittsburgh, we've got some really phenomenal women running that have an opportunity to win, and I'm very excited about them.
That's a great race, the Lindsey Williams race. That's a great race because on the Republican side, a out of nowhere first-time candidate defeated a long-time entrenched candidate, and that was a surprise to everybody.
Yeah.
And so I think that just opened up, and I think we're seeing these things, and that's eventually how there's going to be potential for there to be at least some kind of balancing in our state house. But that was surprising, and I think Lindsey, if you don't know about Lindsey Williams, you should look her up, because she is a really strong candidate. And that was a great primary because you had two you had two women candidates who were both would have been great for the job, and so it was really a win-win sort of situation there. So what about, let's talk a little bit about some of these congressional races, which I think are probably a little bit more. It's more possible, obviously, to swing the House and the Senate, and that I think is where that are we dependent? Are we too confident in the blue wave?
So I'm excited about Pennsylvania because we had the opportunity to have the map redrawn, and that redrawing of our congressional maps really opened up some seats for us. And because I traveled this state, I got to know a lot of the congressional candidates that we have going into November all over the state. So we have to go look out in the Lehigh Valley, where we've got Susan Wild running Charlie Densold's seat. And she's going to win that race. Yeah. I mean, and we will have a woman in our congressional delegation, which we haven't had for a number of years. But we're going to have more than that. We're going to have Chrissy Houlihan, who's also in that area outside Philadelphia and the suburbs of Philly. Yeah. And she's going to win her race too. And, here on our end of the state, Ron DiNicola, we have the chance to really make an impact. Pennsylvania does. Yeah,
I think the Connor Lamb Keith Rothfuss race is going to be. I'm predicting a bit of a semi blowout for Connor Lamb, and that's sort of been. And I live in that district, and I've actually covered Keith. I do, and I've covered Keith Rothfuss for many years. And he's a candidate who. He's a candidate who backed Trump and who's now sort of trying to distance himself, but it's pretty hard to distance yourself when you're literally sitting on someone's shoulders and trying to, and that I think is a race where it's going to hurt. And this is also a race where in the past there's been so much dark money thrown in this race, and we're not seeing that this time. Yeah. So I think people kind of see that Connor Lamb has so much momentum after that special election. What do you think about the U.S. Senate race? Is that one cause for concern? Lou Bartoletta and Bob Casey.
I don't think so.
No?
I don't think Lou's got a chance.
No,
honestly.
I
I don't think the polls are really showing him that he's doing
right.
And I look at the polls. That's all I really know. I look at what Sabato's saying, or the Nate Silvers of the world. But I read the same stuff everybody else does.
Do you think I and others are? Do you think we're a little gun shy after 2016? Because there's no one that can say, at least from our side, I don't think there are many from their side that legitimately thought that he could win. And so I admit it, I am skittish when it comes to this
I just hope my only hope for the next month before this election day is that Democrats continue to be bold. I know I've said it, but they need to inspire people. We can't just rely on Trump being outrageous, because we all know that he is, and we know that tomorrow he's going to say something ridiculous again. But we need to be out there talking about why we're better, why we've got the good ideas, why our ideas are going to change the lives of people. And if we can do that for this next month, I think we'll inspire turnout. I think we'll inspire people to come vote for us, not just against Trump.
Right. And which I think is going to be the key there. So what is your future in politics? Do you foresee a future run or
I'm really happy doing what I'm doing right now. I do so many different things. I'm obviously writing for the Pittsburgh Current.
Absolutely. Arianna is the political columnist for the Pittsburgh Current. You can catch her weekly.
I love it. I wrote this book. I have a job. I'm a mom.
Yeah.
I'm going to school for my PhD right now.
Yeah.
So I have so many different irons in my fire that I am completely content. I'm content helping other women win.
Right.
As soon as I got out of the race, I went and joined Sarah Inamorato's campaign. I was her chair. I am her chair. And that, for me, that win was made my day. It made my year, right? I love Sarah's family, and I'm excited about what she's going to be able to do in Harrisburg, but I'm excited about so many other women that I've gotten the opportunity to know. So I'm fully fine supporting them and watching them win, because I know that they are going to support those issues and those values that I have. What
do you think it's going to take to see real change in campaign finance?
We just have to vote for people that recognize that campaign finance laws need to change.
Right.
We need to get money out of politics yesterday.
Yeah.
And people shouldn't be able to just reach into their dad's pockets and pay for their campaigns. Right.
Yep, absolutely. And finally, I neglected to ask, and I want to ask, so you've told the story to Atlee. She was the genesis for this. What does she think of the new book?
It's her new favorite book.
Is it really?
Oh,
so she's going to grab it?
It sits right next to her bed, and that's her book. Though I think last night she wanted to finally read something different, The Foolish Turtle. But
do you get offended and you say, do you know how much this is your book?
No. But yeah.
That's why I'm not a parent, by the way.
She loves it because she knows that's her. She's like, that's me. So
that's awesome. Yeah, I would certainly be. You read this article on 10 things you hate about Donald Trump. Read it.
Well, my kids, they love being a part of everything. They love being a part of the Pittsburgh Current.
Yeah.
They're my little distributors.
They are. We have coverage out in the Murraysville, Monroeville area because of Arianna's inner kids.
You do. They run around into the Starbucks and everywhere else and drop them off. But they're just proud to see that we're out here still talking about the issues and still making sure that people are aware about what's going on.
That's great. This is the Pittsburgh Current podcast. I have been talking with Aryanna Berringer, who just wrote the book My Place in the World, about her daughter's adventures in being whatever she wants and finding exactly who she wants to be and where she wants to go in this world. Arianna, thank you very much.
No, thanks, Charlie.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick announcements. Coming up, our next issue on October, do the math, 23rd will be our election issue, speaking of elections. So I'm sure Arianna will have an interesting piece in the paper, as well as we're going to devote a lot of the section to, we're trying to take a little bit of a different approach this time. So we're going to make it a little more, we're going to make politics fun, which is probably can't happen, but we'll see what happens. This has been the Pittsburgh Current podcast. Follow us on the socials at PGH Current. And at pittsburghcurrent.com for the latest issue, also available on street boxes and retail locations. And if you want to order My Place in the World, you can get it on AryannaBerringer.com on Amazon. And if you want to have your book signed by Arianna and Atlee, they will be having a book launch party on October 15th at 5 p.m. at Defer Coffee and Tea in the Strip District. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.